Good afternoon, welcome. Thanks for coming out to our second installment of Entrepreneurons this semester. My name is Laura Heisler, I'm Director of Programming for the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, and we are delighted to bring you this series each academic year aimed at connecting people at the UW-Madison campus with those in the community interested in talking about what it takes to get a technology venture up and running. And we are really delighted to be able to have two sessions this month. We have one already next month that I'll tell you about in just a moment. And you can look for more announcements for the rest of the semester. If you got an email from us about today's session, you're on our list. We know where to find you. We'll contact you. If you want to be on our list, please do sign up outside if you aren't already. And please, if you haven't already grabbed a name tag, do grab one, because all of the Entrepreneurons sessions conclude with an informal networking reception, which will take place in the atrium right behind you. This is your ticket to get in, so that we know that you're not just a person who was in the right place at the right time and wants a beer, but rather that you're part of the conversation that we're having today. So we'd love to welcome you to that reception. Let me just say a few words about how the sessions go so you know what to expect. Each of these conversations starts with what we call sort of a deep dive or a keynote, where we talk about the topic at hand. Today it's going to be all about assumption storming. And we have a keynote speaker who will talk for about 40 minutes or so. And then today's speaker will be joining the panel that will follow that talk. And that's when you'll be able to start to think about asking questions of the keynote speaker. So we'll have our keynote talk for about 40 minutes. Then we'll have a panel discussion. And we have with us today an experienced moderator who's going to tease out a few more perspectives from the panel on the topic. And then we'll have a facilitated conversation with them, and then we'll spend the last 20 minutes or so up until 5:30 fielding your questions that you can direct to anybody on the panel or to the moderator. So about 40 minutes of keynote, about 20 minutes or so of conversation amongst the panelists, and then we turn things over to you. All of these sessions are recorded, and you can find videos from all of the past Entrepreneurons over the past 4.5 years on the WARF website, which you can find here, warf.org/entrepreneurons. Because we record them, we do ask that you wait for one of our mic runners to find you during the Q&A sessions. So we'll have 2 mic runners. So just put your hand up, they'll find you, and they'll get a little bit of a line going of people waiting for the questions, and the moderator will call on you and you'll get to ask your question. That way everyone on video can hear what your question is, because I'm sure it's a good one that other people will have as well. So please do wait for the mic to find you. I also want to mention that tomorrow you will get an email from us asking you to review what you participated in today. We do a survey after each of the sessions looking for your feedback on how this one went and your thoughts on topics that we might want to think about in the future. So please do look for that email. With no further ado, I'm delighted to introduce today's keynote speaker, Gordon Nameni. Gordon is a management consultant with August Brown, which is a boutique management consulting firm in Milwaukee. As a management consultant, Gordon works with Fortune 200 companies down to small engineering firms on the commercialization of emerging technologies, business model development, and new market placement of advanced materials-based technologies in the energy, power, sensor, and environmental markets. Most notably, he led the development of the original business case and innovation pipeline for the conversion, reuse, and commercialization of scrap fiberglass, which is a new industry that is set to produce value-added advanced materials for the cement, concrete, and paint industries. He conducted an NSF-sponsored corporate postdoctoral research fellowship at A.O. Smith Corporation and spent 2009 as a Fulbright Scholar at Tshwane University of Technology in Pretoria, South Africa. He also completed a Bachelor's of Science and a Master's of Science at Brown University and his PhD at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and we are delighted to welcome Gordon Nameni.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you everybody for attending this Entrepreneurons series. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak with you today. So as you can see, we're going to be talking about defining a market opportunity and also figuring out ways to tap into new areas of growth, either a new opportunity or expanding on an existing opportunity. So again, it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you. And before we get started, I want to share a little bit about my background, because I feel like it's somewhat relevant to be able to have you guys understand where I come from, to pull out the information that we're going to talk about. And before I do that, before I share about my background, I'd like to find out the background of the audience. So raise your hand if you are a student. Okay, so maybe about 20, maybe 10 to 20 people here. Raise your hand if you are coming from the engineering and science world. Okay, the majority of you. And raise your hand if you're coming from the business world, marketing. Okay, looks about a pretty even split between the business guys and the engineering guys. Okay, that really helps me orient the presentation. So just a little bit about my background. You heard Laura explain that I did my undergrad at Brown University in materials engineering. My master's was in biomedical engineering. From there, I took a little bit of a break and became a semiconductor engineer at Texas Instruments for a time. From there, went and completed my PhD in material science, developing new technologies for water purification, air quality. Great experience, led to a Fulbright, and then led to a postdoc at A.O. Smith in town. And it's been great because through that, I've definitely done a lot of entrepreneurship competitions, did quite well. I've written a lot of technical papers, and I've been granted a couple of patents. Through it, I was able to raise funds for a startup. I was able to divest a company. So I feel like I got a lot of good experience from a technical side as well as from a business side. But the short story is that I've lived in both the business world and the technical world. In fact, I probably feel more comfortable in a lab coat, okay? So at the end of the day, I see that I've come to the belief that while the technology is important and it opens doors to countless new areas for our society, at the end of the day, from my perspective, given my experience, being a technologist, being a scientist, being an engineer, I think that the true driver for growth opportunities is actually in the marketing, as well as the adoption of a good sales model. So I think at the end of the day, that's what drives new business. That's what drives us into new frontiers. The technology is a gateway. The marketing and sales is what I would equal to the gas pedal, okay? So that frames up what we're gonna be talking about, okay? So nothing against the engineers and the scientists. We value your contribution to our society, but how society is gonna change will be a strong marketing and sales effort. So that's what we're gonna get to today. So in the first half of the talk, I'm gonna focus on giving everyone the same platform in terms of the tools for analyzing a market. Okay, so the tools for understanding what the size of the opportunity is. We'll go over the standard approaches. We'll then go over the new, more exact way of analyzing a market through basis and relational data analysis. And then in the second half of the talk, we'll switch gears and we'll focus on reframing the entire box. Okay, how can we sit where we are right now, figure out new ways of taking what you have, your startup idea, and taking it to the next level by adding additional areas of innovation. So I'll talk about the tools that can allow you to do that, and hopefully you'll be able to walk away with a little bit more than what you started when you came in. Through that, we'll talk through lateral thinking, and we'll then do some examples of what assumption storming is. And then you'll also understand the basis for why I have this at the table. I don't know if some of you guys in the back may not be able to see this, but I have a harmonica. I was thinking whether I should try to blow it or not, so I thought for the fun of it, I'm gonna blow it, so why not? At any rate, there's a harmonica, there's a marker, some random objects that I stole from my kids, like my daughter's little, I think that's an elephant there, elephant bear, whatever it is. At any rate, so you will see the relevance for that here in a little bit, okay? So to start off, I thought that it would be a good idea to share with you just some basic market definitions so we can be speaking the same language as we go through the talk. So we're going to start with this framework that we developed at my consulting company, August Brown. So this is what we call a capability-driven market analysis. And what you see here is a diagram that shows the total market space, which is really the universe. I don't know if you can make that out, but this is a different color over here. The total market space is the universe for a potential idea, right? Whatever you think it is that you're developing, or whatever you're, let's say you're sitting at a Fortune 100 or a Fortune 500 company, and you guys are going after this specific space. The total market space considers everything. The company capabilities are basically the people, the equipment, the processes, the intellectual capital that you have in your business to be able to produce the good that you're going after. And then you have the addressable market. The addressable market is effectively what your capabilities can enable you to convert into a revenue opportunity. Okay? So when you hear someone say, oh my gosh, it's $1 billion market, well, the natural reaction would be, oh really? How much of that is accessible? How much of that is addressable? And that's what the addressable market is. What can you actually exploit based on your capabilities? And then you also have the individual market opportunities and the target market. So now the market opportunities are the discrete revenue channels that you can get through your capabilities. Okay, now there can be actually multiple market opportunities for one product, and multiple market opportunities add up to be your target market. Okay, and so that kind of gives you some flavors, some definitions to the different languages that we're going to be using as we move along. Okay, so why is market sizing important? Okay, market sizing is important because it really helps to quantify and validate the business opportunity. It paints a really nice, compelling picture for your stakeholders. So if you have to defend why you made that investment, or you have to defend why you're going after capital, it helps explain everything to the layman, right? It puts things in very quantifiable terms that you can have a language over. And it also provides a good sniff test. It really helps you ask yourself the question, is it worth my while to pursue this opportunity? Okay, and so it sounds very basic, but it's something that often doesn't get done. Okay, so for example, is this case. So in my consulting company, we had a major company come to us and say, hey, we are considering this opportunity. Our engineers tell us that it's a market size of $1.8 billion. This is great, Gordon. We want to go after this. So let's really understand what the opportunity is here. We did some studies. We did some research. We found out that in America, so basically the business idea was that they wanted to take up retired or shut down coal-fired power plants, and they wanted to convert that and make that into emissions compliant energy producing plants, right? So it would require some investment in terms of buying an old plant or refurbishing an old plant. It could range from hundreds of thousands to potentially $1 million or so to do this, right? So it's a really big, important decision that this company had to make. So they called for some consulting help, and we did a study. We found out that, okay, within America, there's only certain states that allow a deregulated energy market. So in other words, even if you were to buy a plant in a state, if the energy market is not deregulated, you can't sell your electricity. So right away, we were able to figure out that the actual market size, the addressable market size, is a fraction of what the engineers and scientists claimed it to be. In fact, when we did more research, we found out that given the production capabilities of a converted plant, the total revenues per year would have been 70 million based on the electrical production. And because of the new technology, it would require some bags which could be retailed from their resources. And we found out that the calculated market size was approximately $70 million. Okay, so now why is that important? Would you invest in something like that with hundreds of thousands of dollars of investments required for a $70 million return? Probably not. So that kind of sets us up. That tells us that, we have the tools, the language that we're going to be using, and we have the importance of why it's actually a great exercise to take yourself through a market sizing, even if you haven't really thought about, I'm not really at that stage yet. I'm going to give it some time. I suggest that the sooner that you do that in the process, you can even find out more opportunities by understanding what your total market size is. So with that said, we're going to switch over and we're going to talk about some basics for market sizing and some of the common tools that people use, some of the ways that you can employ some of these techniques into your own space, defining your own market, depending on whether you're already at a company or if you're thinking about starting on an entrepreneurial project or idea. So the first thing, I have to admit that some of this data is not quite complete, but we'll work with what we have. So the first thing that we're looking at here is that in assessing the market, there are a number of government data sources that you can use, and I would say for the most part, we're lucky in the fact that a lot of our information in America in terms of critical markets are online. So the government does a really good job with keeping statistics on big markets and so forth. And the issue, though, that we're going to talk about a little later is when you get into areas where you're either going after a niche approach or a niche opportunity, or you just don't think that there's something else out there. And that's when the tools that we're going to get into are going to apply. Okay, but just as a way of communicating what's out there, you obviously, the Census Bureau is one of the #1 places to get good information from. They'll offer information in terms of annual surveys of manufacturers. You'll be able to find information on shipments from census.gov. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is not here. That's why I said that all the information is not complete. At any rate, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is bls.gov. Write that down. Is a great place to find information on the number of employees in a given sector, the average salaries in a specific industry. That allows you to also understand what the buying power is of your potential target market and so forth. So the BLS is a great tool that we use constantly all the time at August Brown. The U.S. Geological Survey provides topographical maps, GIS data. They also provide information on commodity materials. I'm a material scientist. A lot of our projects at August Brown really start with a new material being developed, and a company wants to commercialize, and they want to get this emerging technology into the market space. And so we use oftentimes the U.S. Geological Survey. Great source. Then, of course, you have the U.S. Energy Information Administration, where you'll find a lot of production data on energy, coal, oil, gas, fracking, fluids, and the like. So it's a great resource. Now, oftentimes you would think that, okay, associations, you usually kind of have to be a member to get data out of associations. The truth of the matter is that yes, as a member, you get more information, but there is readily available information to the general public if you were to use an association. So Aluminum Association, for example, you'll be able to get statistics from their websites. You'll understand what the annual rate of production is. Aluminum goes into many different commodity products in America. So if you're developing a new bicycle, for example, you can understand what the production rate of aluminum is and the total cost that would feed into your product that you're developing. Ward's Auto provides vehicle annual sales data. Did something just happen there? Okay, I don't know what that is. I'll just hit this button here. So it's the bottom line is that there's a lot of sources to access public data that's online, and the question that I'll ask Laura is whether or not they can make these slides available to people afterwards. And you guys can always go in there and use that as a source for finding out references. So another commonly, okay, how's that? Okay. So the issue, though, like I said earlier, is that the market size is not published for all markets. The published data may not be available for small markets, or international markets may not be sufficiently segmented. So you may have to go into other techniques. So another area for galvanizing market data is by conducting competitor analysis. And what does this really entail? Basically, the approach is, if you, let's say you're in an area where it's rather concentrated and you know who the major players are. Well, one technique that people oftentimes do, you pull up the annual report of the 10K, you figure out what the revenue numbers are of the major players, you extrapolate out what the rest of the revenue numbers could be for the smaller guys, and boom, you have your market size there. So the competitive sales information is great when you're dealing with public companies, because you have sources like NASDAQ, MarketWatch, you have Yahoo Finance, you have Google Finance. There are a lot of different sources that are out there to access the public data. In the public data, you're going to get the financials, the earnings, you're going to get market capitalization, you're going to get performance over a time period, and you're also going to get the key competitors within the public sector of that company. So it's great because you'll be able to not only find out the metrics for the company that you're looking at, you also find out what their competitors are, and you essentially add up those numbers in aggregates. Now, for the private companies, however, it's a little tricky, right? Let's say you're developing a new product and you're producing a new skin healing topographical coating that you're going to be able to put for accelerating the healing process. Well, it's going to be hard to be able to extract that information, not even if the company is public, but it's going to be hard to extract that information from a private company. But there are some sources that you can go to, as you can see up there, to extract information from private companies. There, you'll get financials. You'll also be able to get the major players within the company, which could be something that would be useful for surveys and the like. So the only issue with the approach when you're looking at competitor sales is that adding up competitor sales to determine the market size is not exactly feasible in fragmented markets. And it really relies on the collection of relatively sensitive competitive intelligence, which you may not get access to. So there are other ways to get access to that information. You can conduct surveys, okay? Now you can conduct surveys of prospective customers, and you can conduct surveys of existing customers if you're already working at a large company, right? And there are a number of tools that are out there that people use to conduct these surveys. Up there is just a listing of a few and some companies that provide the service. GLG is a great source for having very scripted surveys in specific industries. to pull out the information that you want, and so what is a survey? What does it look like? Okay, what does it smell like? For the effective surveys, you want to basically produce a survey that allows the information such as how a particular need can be fulfilled, right? We're developing a new product for childhood obesity. How do you access medicines, or how do you access tools in this particular area for people who are already in that space, right? Your survey is going to be focused on people that you think could be a prospective buyer. And so how questions are great. Another area of questioning that would come out of the surveys would also be effectively, are you willing to try? Or even a binary question, yes or no. Do you struggle in this area, yes or no? Have you had this disease, yes or no? At any rate, the trick and the hard part of the surveys, more than anything, is getting people to actually do them. So the quicker they are, the smaller they are, the more effective you can be with your surveys. But they are a great tool for pulling out information that otherwise is really hard to get, right? And when you get that information, you use it, you extrapolate it across an industry, and you can develop a market size. So determining the market size by surveying customers can be costly, though, in B2B markets where customers are hard to reach and the market penetration is low. So how do you get information for a market if the people that you want to reach are hard to find, and you don't necessarily have the capital or the scale to be able to conduct a large industry-wide survey, right? Well, a couple of techniques that you can use is top-down market analysis. This is the one that you hear all the time about. So I'm sure that many of you who are in the business world have seen this before. So this is just a very basic explanation. Effectively, the blue is the total market space. The A is a filter, B is a filter, and effectively the addressable market size is the total market space multiplied by the percentage of your filters. Okay, so very straightforward stuff. Top-down market analysis is a great back-of-the-envelope calculation that you can do when you're in the restaurant. Oh, I think it's about this size of the market, and great tool to understand where you are. The issue is it's obviously quicker, more time efficient, but the problem is that it really lacks the details and is not able to provide really an in-depth opportunity analysis. So the bottom-up market analysis is something that is really used to determine the addressable market. It's focused on that. And so effectively it identifies the individual pieces that would make up the market opportunities. So each of these buckets would basically be your specific segment, which effectively is your market opportunity. And you aggregate up all these market opportunities, and there is your target market, and in a larger sense, there is your addressable market. Very straightforward. I guess I need to get this button right. Very straightforward, it's very accurate, but it takes much longer. And the takeaway, though, is that it can be more valid than top-down, since it technically will not use non-addressable revenues or units. And what this means here is that when you're doing a bottom-up analysis, you're actually counting the widgets that are in a specific space. So you're not going to estimate on widgets that are not in your space, whereas the top down, you kind of take the whole universe and you give a portion of percentage in this area, a portion of percentage in this area, and there could be a lot of fat in there, whereas the bottom up, you're actually specifically going after individual sectors. Okay, I think I'm getting the hang of this. So I want to slide over to a new approach, which is called basis and relational data analysis. I don't know how much of this stuff came out of our consulting company, but this is what we apply all the time at August Brown to drive at what a real market opportunity is. So it really provides high fidelity estimates of a particular addressable market space. It's used when the standard approaches are either too costly or just untenable. Effectively, it's more accurate, it allows for nuances to be applied, and it offers an in-depth opportunity analysis. And effectively, what you do is you have a set of basis data, right? So your basis data can be your reference, and then the relational data would be information that you perhaps get from a survey or something to that effect. And so here are some examples of basis data that you could use. You know, if you are in the production space, right? So if you are, you know, as our colleague will talk about here in a little bit, producing energy drinks or canned sodas or anything like that, you know, you'll use raw materials as your basis data. You're going to be able to use permits. You know, let's say if you're developing a new transportation product and you want to understand what your potential market is, you could look at permits in a given city or in a given state as your basis data. From a distribution standpoint, basis data could be the size of the sales force that you're going after. It could be import-export data, may be used as your basis data. The amount of packaging used in distributing a product may also be used as your basis data. For the end use, it could be the specific number of users that are reported in a particular website. That could be your basis data. You've developed a new product and you're going after millennials between this age and this age. You find out that, okay, at this particular site that a lot of millennials go to, there is 50 million people per day that visit the site. That's your basis data. And now, the process for coming into this is one, brainstorming, right? So you're gonna find after the initial brainstorming, you're gonna find out, okay, you know what? For this particular market analysis, I have 2 points of basis data that I can use, right? And then from there, you're gonna have interviews to really understand, okay, what opportunities there are to actually expand or retract your market analysis in terms of including or excluding specific basis data. And then lastly, and I would say this, that a lot of the stuff sounds very rigid and very academic, but it's very fluid. Okay, then at the end of the day, you're trying to increase the fidelity of a potential market size and opportunity. Okay, and what I've noticed in my experience is that whenever you talk to people, whenever you're conducting interviews, that's the best way to really drive the fidelity of information, right? So the interviews are very important. And lastly, with respect to the relational data connections, the idea is that once you have your basis data, you have to figure out a way to pull out what the key pieces of information are that's going to drive at what the market size will be. And so in terms of the relational data, may come from public sources, but they usually are going to come from conversational interviews with small and medium enterprises, depending on what your target market is. So here's a couple of examples. And how am I doing on time, Laura? Yes. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to fly through a couple of examples real quick. So basically, this is the methodology, the same basis and relational data size methodology applied towards the smartphone market. There you have it, $155 billion through basis data and relational data analysis. U.S. disposable diaper market. What is the size of the disposable diaper market in the U.S. per year? If you consider the basis data of the US population, Gen Z, as well as the baby boomers and so forth, you end up with a total size of $23 billion. Or, I'm sorry, that's the number of 23 million is the billion is the number of diapers that get produced. When you multiply that by the price of each diaper, the market size is 4.7 billion. And so same exercise for bubblegum market and so forth, but I think that you understand the approach. The market size would be 3.9 billion. And so now we're going to quickly pivot towards reframing the box. Figuring out ways to, or at least understanding some of the ways that can be employed to expand and attract, to expand and really take advantage of new opportunities that may not readily be noticeable. So this right here is a picture of the various ways that a company, an opportunity could potentially grow, okay? So whatever it may be, here's your existing, okay? Generally speaking, when you're in the market, you're gonna wanna grow in the least expensive way, generally speaking, all right? So finding adjacencies is a great way to be able to use and leverage your existing capabilities and step into a different market space to continue to grow. And then the next area of growth is finding a blue ocean. Something completely tangential to where you are may require investment in new capabilities, but what we're going to talk about is, firstly, techniques that will allow you to identify adjacencies, and then potentially techniques to apply to identify the blue ocean opportunities. So first, let's step back and look at the definition of a viable market opportunity. So really, it fits in your addressable market, so which means that this is an opportunity that fits within your wheelhouse, right? It's within your total market space. It allows you to leverage your existing capabilities. It involves an attractive market, which means that you can potentially make money, and it involves a lower market entry cost because you already have the equipment and processes in place. And it also allows you to take advantage of a competitive opening. So it could be a timing issue, or it just simply could just be an opportunity that allows you to step into something without actually spending any money. So how do we get there? Lateral thinking can identify the out-of-the-box opportunities, and the assumption storming, I think, is the best tool to allow the harvesting of blue ocean opportunities. And a bullseye is a technique that you would use to prioritize which of those opportunities you would go into. So, like I said earlier in the early part of my talk, you're going to understand the need for me to bring up these items here. So, with lateral thinking, the mechanics of how this works is you use random nearby objects and you use reasoning that's not immediately like intuitive, right? So, for example, we've been talking, one of our panel members is in the energy drink space, and I've pulled up energy drinks for a reason. So at any rate, so basically the way that lateral thinking is going to work is you're going to find random objects, right, that could be in your office, it could be in your home. This is my daughter's teddy bear, whatever this thing is. I don't know what this thing is. Is this a buffalo? Okay, whatever this thing is, a buffalo. Okay, and you're going to figure out ways to connect this buffalo into your product. Okay, so in this case, we're talking about energy drinks. So Dan, would you mind? Okay, Laura, this is a harmonica. My son is an avid Rubik's Cube person, so I'm just going to hand this to you. And we're going to think about, how does that buffalo relate to energy drinks? Can you come up with one thing for me, Dan?
He's really strong.
Really strong. So that could be a branding opportunity for your energy drinks. What about you, Greg? with this Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, the Rubik's Cube, it takes a lot of mental capacity to do it.
Yeah.
Energy drinks might help you do
Absolutely. You could market your energy drinks as the way to increase your brain power, right? And what about you, Laura? What do you have?
Harmonica, maybe self-expression, but different ways.
There you go. Absolutely, absolutely. So, I have other devices here. I have a lotion from my wife. Maybe a lotion. Thinking about energy drinks, the lotion could allow you to have a slicker sort of packaging. Who knows? There's a marker here. The bottom line is that lateral thinking is a way to bring in out-of-the-box ideas into something that you're already in. The key questions that you want to think about when you are working in a lateral thinking exercise: does the opportunity strengthen the core business? Okay, so we can come up with these random ideas, but are they really useful to us? Does the adjacent market create a competitive advantage? If we're trying to move up, do a sidestep into a different space, does it allow us to have a competitive advantage? And then lastly, can you effectively implement or execute an entry into the market? So what are the capabilities of actually bringing in this lateral thinking idea into your development? So for assumption storming, okay, so assumption storming, the way to think about this is the equivalent of brainstorming. Instead of brainstorming new ideas, you're actually brainstorming assumptions, right? What are the key assumptions that I have for this product? Okay, when launching a new product, it can be used when launching a new product tool, product design, strategic planning, process improvements. Engineers use assumption storming all the time. It can be used when current solutions are stale, boring, commoditized, undifferentiated, or in need of a refresh, right? In the case of assumption storming, it's really used when you're really trying to tackle larger problems and when you're attempting to really look at a particular problem from multiple separate directions. And so here are the steps. I'm not going to walk through them for the sake of time. I think the general idea is that you want to have a diverse group of people. You don't want it to be all engineers in the room, okay? Nothing against engineers and scientists, but you certainly want it to be across a spectrum of people. You get into a room and you start asking, what are the key assumptions of this product? For example, with energy drinks, an assumption is that people do not drink energy drinks in the morning, and the way that you pose the question also allows you to answer it in a way that opens things up. And so what I find effective is when you're posing an assumption storming question on the negative, right? So for example, why do people, the consumers of energy drinks generally do not drink energy drinks at night, right? And that's a major assumption, and it's a negative. And so now the next step in this process is to really attack the assumptions. All the assumptions that you've listed down, you've looked at it, you've put the question in this little grid here. Is it a risky thing or is it an important thing? You just stick it into this grid, and then you start attacking all the assumptions, okay? And through the process of attacking the assumptions, you find the opportunity. Here are some categories to attack. You can attack the product service, you can attack customers, you can attack process functions, you can even attack the expectations of what one would expect from the product. And you can also attack the specific criterias of the specific product. So for example, offering something online, this particular product cannot be offered online. And by attacking the assumption, you open up the opportunities. So here are some practical outcomes that have come about from assumption storming. It was the discovery of hydraulic fracturing. It broke the assumption that oil wells could only go vertically. They started drilling laterally, right? That was breaking the assumption. In the food and beverage area, it attacked the assumption that coffee and breakfast first of all, attack the assumption that coffee could only be drunk in the morning, right? And they were able to make a multi-billion-dollar business with 27,000 stores worldwide. That's Starbucks. Subway started selling their breakfast menu all through the day by attacking that assumption. And from a retail perspective, why couldn't stores stay open 24/7? It ended up being an issue of scale, and certain large box stores have solved that problem. So to bring things up, we're, I think, about out of time, okay? I want to just close up to say that when you're thinking about assumption storming, there's certainly opportunities to go above and beyond what your current space is. The book, Blue Ocean Strategy, was published in 2004. It's really changed the dynamics of many different industries. The idea is that you can apply assumption storming to some of the frameworks that help you develop a blue ocean. By doing assumption storming around the 4 pillars of the framework, reduce, raise, eliminate, create, you will certainly find new opportunities that can be availed. And then lastly, once you've done your lateral thinking, once you've done your assumption storming exercise, how do you figure out and focus on a priority? Taking all things considered, the bullseye is a great tool to be able to do that. You basically, it's really essentially used to minimize cost of execution. Central or areas that are within your existing capabilities. In the secondary bucket, those are areas that are low cost expansions. Tertiary are areas that would require some spend. By taking your ideas from lateral thinking, assumption storming, putting it into the box of a bullseye, you can then prioritize where you're going to focus on based on a financial framework, right? So that is all that I have, and I want to thank you guys for your time, and we look forward to speaking more at the panelist discussion.
Ask the panelists to come up. Build on it with the panel. I'd like to introduce our 2 additional panelists. First is Michelle Somes-Booher. Michelle's the director of the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center at UW-Madison. The SBDC provides no-cost consulting and training for entrepreneurs. In addition to that role of director, she also consults with other clients, primarily established businesses, and has expertise in marketing, management. Michelle also assists clients in improving their operations, increasing sales, and incorporating sound financial practices as they grow. She's got over 10 years of sales and marketing experience and previously owned a small business. In addition, she has significant experience teaching entrepreneurship and management in higher education. She holds her undergrad in management and interpersonal and public communication, as well as her MBA from Central Michigan University. So welcome, Michelle. And Asim Khan is the co-founder of Zin Beverages, and he's going to tell us about that in just a moment. Prior to the energy or the beverage business, he was a managing director at Mason Wells, a private equity investment group with over $1 billion under management, where he was responsible for all aspects of the firm's buyout activities for nearly 13 years and served on the board of directors of numerous portfolio companies. Previously, he was a technology investment banker with Merrill Lynch and the SWS Group. Khan graduated from Marquette University with his BS in accounting and finance. So we're very excited to have both of them on the panel. I'd like to actually start, and I'll start with you, Asim. If you'd tell us a little bit about your business.
Sure. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Zin Beverages is the first to market curcumin-infused beverage. Curcumin is the bioactive ingredient in turmeric. Turmeric has been trending significantly in the U.S., but it has been a trend for 5,000 years in the East. It's used in daily diets in much of Asia. It also is used as a healing ingredient. Curcumin is a very strong anti-inflammatory and an antioxidant. To several points that Gordon said earlier, we're not trying to enter into a crowded market. We, in fact, are creating our own category with a beverage, a ready-to-drink beverage that helps address people's inflammation issues. And per science, inflammation is the root cause of all major ailments. And curcumin has been studied extensively for the treatment of many different ailments. There's over 30,000 research papers. So we crafted our beverage to attack a completely new market, not the energy drink market.
Great. Michelle.
Thanks for having us. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center, as Dan said. So the Small Business Development Centers are part of a national network. We were founded by the Small Business Administration 38 years ago. We're in every state. In the state of Wisconsin, we have over 12 locations. So at UW-Madison, we offer no-cost consulting to entrepreneurs, and we work with people in all kinds of different industries. Last year, we saw over 334 clients in a variety of industries, from technology to service industries, Main Street, so forth. Our clients last year obtained $10.1 million in capital. So the work that we're doing is really, really significant. We helped 30 people start a brand new business, and we work with entrepreneurs and existing companies.
Great. So I have a few questions for the panel, and Gordon talked about in the beginning this ability, how do you get market information when it's not publicly available, really hard to get. So I think it'd be great to, any thoughts you have or examples where you've had to do this and how any advice you could give to an entrepreneur when they're trying to get their arms around the market and it's not readily available.
Sure. So in our instance, we are creating a new category within the functional beverage space. So there isn't really any data out there that we were able to scour the internet for. So what we did is we looked at health and wellness trends. We also looked at what's going on with consumer behavior. So trying to understand where the pull is going to come from. And one thing that's going on in the consumer beverage space is that there's a trend towards low sugar. Majority of the drinks out there, from Coke all the way to the kombuchas, they have lots and lots of sugar. But sugar is an inflammatory agent. It creates the inflammation that leads to various diseases, including diabetes. And more recently, there's been linkage to cancer from sugar because it creates the inflammation in the tissues. So what we wanted to do when we proceeded with formulating and crafting our beverages was to come up with great tasting beverages that were low in sugar. So that was one aspect. The other aspect is as science becomes more and more aware of the root causes of ailments and association with inflammation, we saw that as a huge opportunity. There isn't any other beverage product out there that currently has curcumin as the bioactive ingredient, the main ingredient for functional benefits. So fighting inflammation are becoming more and more paramount as the medical community learns more about the causes of conditions.
A really common question at the Small Business Development Center, because for a couple of reasons. One is that some of our entrepreneurs just don't have any money, so even if the information is available, those big reports that are done by certain companies, they just can't afford them, or it's just not worth it based on the size and scope and scale of their businesses in those early stages. So the first thing that we do, I would say, is to look at those resources like Gordon mentioned that are available But also kind of taking that one step further, your library is a great place to go. We happen to have a really good business librarian at the Wisconsin School of Business that is just great at digging in and finding a lot of information for us. So the libraries will subscribe to databases, and sometimes you can get information that way, and I think that's important to understand. So not just Googling it yourself, but really reaching out to those resources that are available in your community at no cost to you. And just so that you know, as citizens of the state of Wisconsin, you can use the UW system libraries. That's available to you as residents. So that's one thing that we do. And Gordon also mentioned trade associations are really great, and sometimes they're often overlooked because the assumption is I have to pay a big fee to become a member of a trade association, where a lot of times there'll be sample reports that they're willing to give out in order to entice you into their trade association. So that's a great way to start.
Great. Gordon, any more you want to add, or you had some great examples earlier?
Yeah, well, I would say that the one avenue that I normally use to get after market information that's not readily available, is literally picking up the phone and talking to people. Literally, if you have an idea and you're thinking about starting a new business, you are in a company and you want to grow this particular product service, go to the mall, ask people, figure out what they say, figure out what they're thinking, have your questions scripted, and use that as your basis, not only for motivation, but for figuring out what a buyer would really want. I travel quite a bit, and on my app, I have a Google survey that I build, and depending on the client that I'm working for, the questions change on that app. And I'm constantly asking people what they think about this and what they think about that. So I would say that, Dan, to answer that question, one of the first things that I would do in accessing market information that may not readily be available is to direct outreach.
Yeah, no, and that's great advice, either as a consumer, talking to a consumer,
Yeah.
or if it's a business to business or an expert,
Yeah.
pick up the phone. You never know what they'll
Talk to people.
Yeah, excellent. And then the second part of your talk, Gordon, it was on this assumption storming, which I think is a very interesting approach. And if you would maybe, or any of you would care to talk about some of the best practices on how to creatively think up these assumptions that are out there that may be constraints, and make sure you get a good encompassing list of that.
I'll let you go first.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is to you come into a new product idea or a new business idea with your own set of assumptions to begin with, and so I would say the first step is to record those. Simply record those. Put them on paper. A lot of times entrepreneurs keep them up here, and they're really hard to deal with when they're all up here. So get those down. The second step would be, let's see if we can validate some of those assumptions or hypotheses with secondary data. So go and do some quick research and see what's already out there, what information exists about that. And then take the assumptions that you've made that you can't validate and say, okay, now's the time that I pick up the phone and start calling and figuring out what's next. But there's no sense in attacking maybe some of those early questions that there's plenty of research, plenty of data around. Let's get that information and use that, and then put it aside and try to discover what we don't know by making those phone calls. But what I find with a lot of people is they scatter, right? You go to the question that is burning today, and you start asking that question, and then tomorrow there's a different question, and then there's a different question. So get organized around how you're going to approach it so that you stay moving forward. It's very easy when you're in this research stage to go down the rabbit hole and end up with a lot of information that doesn't help you move your business forward. So staying organized around what you're doing is, I think, a really important part and important for planning.
Sim?
Yeah, so we did a lot of surveys as well, and we talked to a lot of people, friends, family, to try to understand, what they want in a packaged beverage product. And so we were able to learn that taste is very important, obviously. You don't want to get a beverage that doesn't taste great. There's a lot of healthy beverages that people can't consume because they just don't taste great. The other thing was price points. What are the price points at which a healthy beverage can be supported? So our retail price is anywhere from $4.49 to $4.99, depending upon the stores. And so that's important. That goes up into the consumer behavior. And then the third piece is education. From the perspective of a consumer, what good does your product do for me? What benefits are there? And so we're fortunate that the main ingredient in our beverage is the most researched natural ingredient in the world. There's over 30,000 scientific and medical research papers written about the health benefits of curcumin for various types of ailments. So we provide access to all of that for the consumers through our website. They could do Google searches and they'll find all that information.
Gordon, another thought? I know you had a good list earlier.
Okay, so I would say in answering the question as far as assumption storming to galvanize and identify new ideas, I think that the best time to really get that process started is like what the other speaker shared, is after you have your initial idea, you block your idea off by writing it down, having it in a place where it's protected. When I say protected, what I mean by that is that oftentimes I think in the early stages of idea development, and you have this concept and you think it's great, and then you hear something else. And you're like, oh, well, I think I could do that too. Or I think I can modify my process this way, or I think that I can also do this. And I think that's all fine and good, but I think that really allows a dilution of the initial focus and goals. So I would say, Dan, to answer the question, the assumption storming would come after that idea has been solidly blocked. Okay, that solidly blocked could be a couple of things. It could be, okay, I've developed a working prototype. It could also be, I have a business plan. It could also be, I have a team together. Then at that point in time, I feel that's when assumption storming is the most relevant, because then you would be able to work with other people to hash it out. And when you're conducting assumption storming, it's advisable to do it with at least more than one person, right? Because then you can get a different perspective and a different view of a 360 view of a potential opportunity. So.
And on that, is it also really important to, I'd say, separate the generation of the ideas to the testing of it, so that you create that
Absolutely.
Really robust list before you start culling too early?
Absolutely. That's the idea.
There are a couple of great terms that the panel used, which I think are quite important here. One is the word, experimentation, where you're really trying to kind of test this out on lots of the different dimensions, and also in really being organized and making sure you're working on the right things, because it's easy to, as you said, get down that rabbit hole, and you're busy, but you're not actually making progress in your pushing your idea forward and testing the right things. So I think great observations there.
Yeah, I would say that's where the lean startup methodology, which can be applied to existing businesses as well, is just a great set of best practices, because it forces you to create those assumptions and then work toward validation of those. And the tools like the business model canvas help keep that organized. And I really like that as a set of tools to use.
So if you do this successfully, are there some examples in your own life or in others that you've seen where people have really pushed, and there were some assumptions that were out there that they were able to kind of knock them out and then create an innovative business model?
Yeah, I would say, so let me just step back for a second. The mission of our firm is to bring ancient time-tested healing from around the world, from all natural ingredients that are ethically sourced to the health-conscious consumers. So some of the best examples are coconut water, Zico coconut water. You know, coconuts have been used throughout the world for hydration for thousands of years. And it took somebody who, actually another Marquette University grad who was doing Peace Corps down in South America, and he saw people using coconut for hydration, and that's how he started that market. And he built that market and successfully sold his business. Pomegranate, palm, I don't know if any of you have heard of palm, wonderful. You know, I grew up with palms in Pakistan. We ate that almost every day. But it took somebody to see that this ingredient, which is high in antioxidants, and make it into a packaged good that people could consume in the West. And it's $1 billion company. So those are some of the examples of companies before us that took something that is used in other parts of the world for healing and made it into a consumer product for the Western consumer. And that's what we're looking to do. By the way, we don't have plans to build it and sell the business. That was my previous life and my brother's previous life. We want to build this into a brand that has multiple different products for health and wellness.
I guess I'll take it a little bit different. We were talking about this question in our office, and one of the things that came up was this idea of businesses that are based around crowdsourcing. And, you know, I think, 5-10 years ago, it was assumed that you have to be an expert in something, and you create the expertise and then create the company around it. And we've seen so many companies blossom using crowdsourcing, and one of our shining examples from SBDC is Mobcraft Brewery, where he took this idea of let's let the crowd of home brewers tell us what we should be making and then sell it, which sort of took that industry by surprise, because you're supposed to be a master brewer and spend all these years, and then that's what we make and sell. And what Henry Schwartz was able to do was flip it. And so I this idea of we can change process and then change the way an industry works.
Yeah, great example.
I would say that for me, the example that I can cite is we had an assumption storm around what we can do with this new material. We developed a polymer-derived ceramic, which is basically a ceramic that's made of silica, right? I mean, it's a polymer silica. And so we're looking for new markets. We're looking for ways to, grow, and where can we take this thing to? And we did an assumption storming exercise, and one of the questions was when you're working in the area of materials, oftentimes you're thinking about composites. What can I add to this, and what can we make out of this? Okay, and so in our assumption storming exercise, we asked a question. There's coal out there. Can this material, this material cannot be combined with coal? And we attacked the assumption. We literally just went into the lab and we combined coal with the ceramic, and we were able to develop a new material system that now has a block of around 18 disclosures for patents around. And we're now able to produce a new material that is going into the shingle market, which has much different and superior properties than what's already out there in the space. And that came about through assumption storming. And so it's a good technique to think about options that you previously just don't come across in your normal way of thinking. And it sounds like the people that started the palm and the coconut water probably, broke some very basic assumptions, like who is going to drink coconut water from a coconut, right? And they attacked the assumption, and they were able to validate the market space by attacking the assumption. And I'll just add, Dan, I think the key to assumption storming, it's not necessarily coming up with your assumptions for your product or service. It's the guts, though, the willpower, the guts to actually attack those assumptions. How can I prove this assumption wrong? And in the process of attacking your assumption, in the process of breaking that assumption, that's how you lead into new innovations.
Great. And I think I love the range of examples from technology, product, to the business process, business model. All of those could be assumptions that you're dealing with. Let's open it up for a Q&A. And if you could hold on, we have a couple of speakers with microphones if there are any questions. There.
Hey, I have a question for Gordon. So it was interesting to see in your example for market sizing that it wasn't really that specific. There wasn't a level of granularity there that I'm used to as a marketer. So like for instance, in the first slide you showed, it was, Northeast, for the energy drinks, it was like Northeast, Southwest, West, and you had this pretty glaring assumption that everybody, all these 18 to 44-year-olds were drinking, 2 cans of soda a week or something, and that was pretty constant all the way down. Now, in my experience, when pitching to venture capitalists, that would probably be the first thing that they would point out. It's like, how are you going to assume that everybody is the same, that the person from the South is drinking the same amount as somebody from the North? But it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like in just your experience as a consultant that these market sizing exercises are used more directionally as opposed to more substantially as actual market sizing, or am I incorrect?
Definitely. I think that where I sit, it's more directional. But I think that when you're internal, working for a company and you're doing market sizing is definitely much more rigorous, right? Because you're actually trying to capture what the exact opportunity is. And for the sake of easier communication, that's how I set up that example. But certainly when you are conducting market sizing, the greater the granularity, the better. But I think you should start with asking yourself, are you seeking directional information or are you seeking specific information? And there are times where, especially when you're dealing with investors, they want to know exactly. They want to know exactly what this number is. And oftentimes, the only way that you can really do that is by the bottom up, where you're counting every single entity in that space.
I just make a comment here too about investors. I think it depends on where you're at in the investment cycle, right? So if you're still in a discovery phase and you're looking for seed funding, to assume that you're going to have the granularity that they may want to assure that this is a strong venture is maybe unrealistic in some cases, depending on the industry. So I think some of those rough numbers can help with that early stage seed funding, but it's the later on investments, to your point, right?
Another one there.
So I think the story went with Henry Ford. If he did what the market wanted, he would have built a buggy whip factory. I mean, if the panel could maybe talk about that non-data driven, just go with your feel. And of course, Stephen Jobs as well. I tell the market what I want. I just, as a contrast, like to hear what your views are on that.
I'll go first. So that's exactly what we're doing. When you're creating a new innovative product and you're going to be the first to market, you could do all sorts of analysis, but it's always going to be wrong. It's easier to get data for markets that are established, perhaps not as fragmented, but when you get into creating something new and innovative, you have to have that gut feel, and then you have to do everything in your power to make it happen. So for us, it's about education. And Gordon mentioned it earlier. The innovation piece is, it's valuable, but that's not what makes a business. It's the marketing and sales that makes a business. And for us, it's the marketing. And the marketing for us is the most critical element of building the business, which is educating the consumers on what they need and what they should have, not what they're already taking. So as people learn more about the benefits of curcumin and why anti-inflammation is so important, that's when they start buying our product. not just because we have nice packaging or, great taste and low sugar, but why is inflammation and fighting inflammation so critical for health?
Michelle or Gordon, anything to add?
Sure. So we get this a lot. Somebody will say, I've got a brand new idea, nobody's ever heard it. I'm going to go that way, even though maybe my secondary data is telling me not to. What we say is, okay, then test it with some customers and see what they say. Because if the customers don't want what you're offering, you don't have a business. Mm-hmm. So that's the bottom line, which is why being able to create those assumptions, create some hypothesis around those assumptions and test them with actual real people that you think would buy it, that will give you clarity very quickly. So, ultimately, at the end of the day, I could think that this is a great beverage because it's anti-inflammatory, but like you said, if it doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter. So I think getting your product with the minimal viable, creating that minimal viable product and getting it in front of actual people is really important, as well as doing that kind of background information too. Let's find out what they want. But if I think it's this way and the customers tell me no, you don't have anything.
And on that, I think it's a great question, and you hear it a lot. I think it's the quote, if I'd asked my customers, they would have told me a faster horse. And
That's right.
And so it probably, I think the question is, if you'd explained it as, instead of a faster horse, it's like one that, costs this much money. You don't need to feed it, and you don't need to clean it up after it. Would you be interested as a way to test it? Yeah.
Customers may eat it right up until they love it.
Yeah.
If you took a car to someone who or if they eat it, I do that, I don't know how it works. That's what I'm saying is you have to suspend your.
So then there's limiting factors, right? So money, time, effort, and how far do you go in all of those? Because the reality is, if I show this to 400 people and I'm saying they'll love it, and 400 people are telling me I don't love it, I don't want it, how far am I willing to go as an entrepreneur? And so our job is to help people try to mitigate those risks along the way and make smart decisions, because it may be that you need to pivot. You need to get off of your idea and start listening to what they're telling you. So it might not be that, maybe they loved part of what you had. And you've got to be willing as an entrepreneur to keep your mind open and turn a little bit, because that may be the thing that goes down the road. And we've heard those entrepreneurship stories all the time where somebody starts out to make this and then they end up over here because they were listening to what the customers want. So that was kind of the point that I wanted to make.
Great. Okay. Yes.
I'm wondering about applying assumption storming and reframing to political markets and nonprofits and all of that. I'm thinking of a great gathering here with health care issues or gun control along those lines, and attacking those assumptions maybe that are locking us in. Have you tried it in that situation? And would you need a face-to-face interaction, or would online be just as effective? Thanks so much.
Well, that's a great question. And I can tell you that based on my client base at August Brown, we have not had the opportunity to apply assumption storming in a non-engineering or non-scientific application. But I think it's a great idea. Why not? And with that said, I think that in terms of executing assumption storming, it's always, at least my experience has always been something where it's direct, kind of in the same room, because different things just generate different ideas when you can see somebody in their face and facial expressions. But I think in our day and time, of course, you should be able to, execute that exercise online, maybe even over the phone too. So that's a great idea, to be able to apply assumption storming in the political issues that, we're currently contending with in our society. So.
Yes.
Hi, Alfonso Gutierrez here. I find myself always very uneasy with shooting a cannon to the moon and missing it with a couple of degrees very easily. So when I size a market that is based on the global markets and stuff like that, I find it how believable it is, how easy it is to be mistaken on your assumptions by 1 degree, and then it's a big change. So my question is, how about approaches that are more bottom up? I'm an engineer. I'm more familiar with bill of materials, unit cost, and sort of. So it's what I call a similar concept to the minimum viable product, but I would call it minimal viable market, which is how many units do I need to sell to actually break even my investment? And that would be my size target. How about that?
Well, I think that's sometimes a practical approach, right? Because you have a limited budget that you're working with and so forth. The idea behind the market analysis is twofold. The first is that you really want directional information, okay? Yes, you have, so that's the first fold. The second fold is that you then want to assess, practically speaking, how much you can earn, right? And so your question, it seems to be more focused on, how do I go about getting after how much I can earn? And I think that's very important. And I think that in the course of understanding just how much it would require in terms of sales to break even is just the start, right? Because then you have to figure out, is this sustainable? Right, and so that's the whole idea behind the market analysis. And to get back to what the earlier question was, which was, so what if I'm creating a product that has never been done before, right? I think at the end of the day, that's actually what we want, right? Isn't it? Right? We want to be able to create things that opens up this new opportunity that we had not previously accessed before, right? At the end of the day. So to complement that, the question that I would throw back to you is that how many specific working groups did Steve Jobs have to eventually qualify that the iPhone was the right way to go? He had a ton, right? So to get back to you, I think that at the end of the day, you want to plan directionally speaking, right? And then you also want to plan practically speaking, finding out what that addressable market space is. And if it's an area that is outside of your immediate accessibility, then you want to, in terms of what's already out there, then you want to, as you're going along with your execution, you want to conduct working groups, want to conduct spots of your customers, and dialogue with people that are using your products. It can certainly open up doors for new opportunities and so forth as well.
Okay, I have one last question.
Thanks all you guys for putting this together. You brought up a bunch of different ways to address what your market size is. If you guys were to apply a scoring factor to which ones you are more preferred from, let's say, an investor or someone you're pitching it to, do you think that you could rank them? And I bring this up because I have a pile of peer-to-peer surveys that I've done just by flagging down postdocs and grad students, and I go through my list of questions, I write them down, and I put them on my computer, and I'm terrified that I'm going to show that pitch it to an investor. They're going to say, you made up all these numbers, you didn't, this isn't real, we need a survey from SurveyMonkey, come back with that.
That's a tricky question.
Yeah.
Right. I would say the first thing is have your secondary research. That lends credibility when it comes from the U.S. government or something of that nature. And then as far as your primary data is concerned, it's numbers, right? So if you're asking the same question over and over and over again, if you have 60, 70, 100 of them, and you've reached out beyond your friends and family, the people that love you most, then you're starting to show them something. So, and it's the way that you organize the data too. The whole case you're making, it's not just one thing or another thing.
We use SurveyMonkey for the packaging development. We had different brand names, we had different logos, we had different packaging design, and we first narrowed it down to what was appealing to us. You can't give somebody 30, 40 different options because that's going to just stifle them. So we came down to 3 to 5 of our own best choices, and then we sent out surveys to about 300 people to get their feedback, and that was very helpful for us in making the final decisions on what we were going to ultimately go with. And then we could also use that data as we went and pitched to potential customers, retailers, to take on our product.
Great. I think that's at the end, and the panelists will be joining us. So if you have a follow-on question, hope to join us in the back. I did realize there's one pitch I want to kind of help our entrepreneur here. If I wanted to buy this Zinn product here in Madison, where would I go?
So we're in about 300 retail locations already. We launched in November of last year. We're in all the Hy-Vees in Madison and Fitchburg. So you support the local economy. You could go there. You could also buy 12 packs and 4 packs online. That's free shipping. But Hy-Vees is where I would suggest that you all go. And we're going to be doing some sampling back there. So if you guys want to.
Okay. I was hoping that. That's very good. Thank you.